I am very excited to do this video because we have two series that I really can't decide which one I like more, and that is the Lightbringer versus the Stormlight Archive. I know in my top 10 video I went ahead and threw Lightbringer above Stormlight, but that was really just because I had to choose one, and I kind of just tossed the coin in the air a little bit. We're going to be examining the same 6 categories we did for my last video to see which of these two series, these two amazing epic stories, comes out on top. But in reality, this is just a way for me to talk about two series I really love and I think reflect each other in a good way. So kicking it off, we're going to go with plot. So for Stormlight Archive, you have pretty much as epic a plot you can get for fantasy. It has the grand scaling, different peoples and nations colliding, which is fascinating in itself. There's also smaller scale subplots you follow, like romances and moral questions characters have to answer for themselves, even a murder mystery at one point. It's really interesting how Stormlight Archive really goes through the different levels there can be for an epic fantasy. On the flip side, you have Lightbringer, which is much more of a character-based plot. What I mean by that is it's almost always characters' desires and actions that directly shape how this series goes, while in Stormlight there's just kind of the Parshendi attacking and things like that. Everything within Stormlight is dependent on the characters you follow desire. It's because almost everyone you follow has the power in one way or another to make their desires a reality. Whether it's just being an amazing fighter or quite literally a god walking among men. And as well, Lightbringer does have the smaller subplots as well between characters' moral conflicts and a greater air of mystery throughout the entire series of what the real motivations are for the people you may not actually trust. When it comes down to it, it's just going to be personal preference because they're both executed so well, it would be nearly impossible to declare an actual this is better winner. But for me personally, I've come to enjoy Lightbringer's plot a little bit more because of how naturally it flows and how the characters really are the driving force behind everything. And that brings us to the next up, character. This is going to be the hardest thing to compare throughout this entire video because, well, Lightbringer has probably my favorite characterization. Stormlight Archive has my favorite character development, maybe of all time, maybe only being edged out by Wheel of Time. And it's really difficult to really compare those two things because outside of a couple characters, no one really develops a whole lot in Lightbringer. It's more just an exploration of who they are and maybe some minor changes to their characters due to drastic events. And while that's not necessarily a bad thing, it pales in comparison to the development and scale of unraveling characters that's done in Stormlight. Brandon Sanderson did something really ambitious when he's allowing you to learn everyone's past and future simultaneously. This has been done before in fantasy, but not one by one, character by character, as detailed and thorough as he's going, and it works. It's fascinating to watch each of these characters become unraveled. It helps you understand how they became the person they are in such a deeper level. And if you reread the books, if you understand where Dalinar came from in book 1, so going back to A Way of Kings from Oathbringer, his actions make so much more sense, which shows a level of forethought from Brandon Sanderson that's truly admirable. So for me, I'm going to let Stormlight Archive edge out character by a hair, but it's just because I think Brandon Sanderson's execution of this simple idea in such a complex way is really stunning. Now, following that up, we have World, and this is the only time that I'm going to give a clear winner here, and that has to be Stormlight Archive. Yes, Lightbringer has an incredible world behind it, but Stormlight is just a Goliath when it comes to world building. In just 3 books, Stormlight Archive has established a world that is so beautifully built through the House of Cards type political maneuvering happening at times that I'm in love with it. I think it's the only world that's being built that maybe even rivals Wheel of Time down the road if it continues developing as well as it is. And I have to give the point here to Stormlight Archive, hands down. Next up, we have the magic systems, and this is actually another kind of blowing it out of the water in my opinion, and that's for Lightbringer. Yes, Stormlight certainly has some neat magic aspects to it, but magic isn't really the focal point of much of the series besides maybe the other spiritual stuff, but to me that lends more into the world building. The actual actively used magic systems for Stormlight are neat, but not hyper original, and for me personally, I really stopped being wowed by Stormlight Archive's magic system in the 3rd book. I still really enjoy it, but it's not surprising surprise me that much anymore. On the other hand, Lightbringer has one of the most versatile magic systems ever created. The use of these Luxons and their different strengths and weaknesses is something that allows the author to do all kinds of crazy fun stuff with his characters again and again. And I'm a huge fan of how well it's done. The non-stop surprising use of the magic system here off such a simple idea makes the fight scenes better, it makes the overall epic battles more interesting, and it makes the characters you follow still feel human and touchable while also kind of elevated to this nearly god level status. It's so well done that if you don't even like Lightbringer as a whole, you might be able to just finish the series just to see what this crazy kooky magic system is going to do next. And Lightbringer takes an easy victory here walking around the park. So next up you have Readability, and neither series is finished, but you have to just go off of what the author's vision here, how easy it is to follow, the number of characters, and how clearly and concisely the author conveys the information to the reader. And I think this is actually going to be a wash because Stormlight Archive has way more going on and without a doubt is harder to follow in some ways, but it's still so well conveyed to the reader that it's really admirable. Meanwhile, Lightbringer is a little more simple in terms of the amount you need to kind of keep up with and remember, but it's still much easier to actually follow that. So with the two different balances there, that yes, Stormlight does it better, but overall Lightbringer is just easier to follow, I'm calling this point a wash.
Coward.
Now for the overall setting, I actually haven't chosen a winner for this one yet, and I'm just going to talk and see which one I kind of come to a conclusion to, and there you'll know. The setting of Lightbringer is an empire in civil war, with one kind of godlike figure being the helm of the empire and a whole lot of corruption and backstabbing and things like that around him. It is very interesting. It's a neat setting, and the amount of history and the magic system being so well blended into the culture and warfare here, it comes together with a pretty bow on top. Meanwhile, Stormlight, you have this huge epic scope that is so well flushed out in terms of history and what led to the conflicts you're in now. You can't help but realize that Stormlight Archives is walking a well-trodden path, but doing it so well, it's kind of just dancing where people have only crawled before. But what really gives Stormlight the W here is the Cosmere. It's a little bit cheating, but I can't ignore it. Brandon Sanderson has built a universe while Lightbringer is just building a world, and Stormlight is connected to this universe, so I have to take it into account. Basically, Brent Weeks is playing chess while Brandon Sanderson is over here building a rocket. I respect the chess, but you have to admit the rocket's the way to go. Both of these series are so incredible, and I think they're absolutely must-reads for fantasy fans. I would recommend picking up Lightbringer first, just based off the fact that it's a little easier to get into, and Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive, while is undeniably incredible, takes investment. Maybe that's just me, because I like coming up with tons of fans' theories for it, and I love to really think about what's going on in this world and the implications and try to make guesses for the future, and that's just the brilliance of Brandon Sanderson's writing. For me, at least, he envelops you in such a way that you can't just dabble a toe in what he's building, you need to dive in. Meanwhile, Brent Weeks has made one of the best thriller type fantasies I've read in a long time. On the other hand, Brent Weeks writes military conflicts. On the other hand, Brent Weeks, he writes military conflicts and battles better than anyone else I've seen in the fantasy genre, and the magic system itself elevates that writing to an even higher level. That's not even mentioning the fact that Lightbringer has one of the best plot twists I've read in ages, and even if you think you can predict it, there's gonna be some twists down the road that shake up how you're viewing everything. And that's difficult to do, especially with today's highly saturated audience that they can usually see things coming. I hope you guys are enjoying these videos. I really like the idea of these kind of versus things. I can't read books at the rate of putting out a video every day, but I want to keep you guys entertained, and I can certainly have the time to make a video, so these seem like a good way to go. I might do a few more of these, and there's going to be some more character examinations coming down the road as well. I hope you guys are having a good week. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support the channel, see me focus more on it. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to see how interesting or boring my life is, depending on the week. Have a good one, y'all. Peace. Also, a friend of mine here in Alabama just posted his first video, and I'd love you guys to show him some support, add to his view count, give him some encouragement to keep going. He's a music tuber, YouTube music, Tube Muser. He's a music tube guy, and I think he deserves all the support. Very talented guitar player, and definitely worth checking out. He's linked right down below and by my face.